Hello, welcome to today's show. I'm Jacqueline Stockwell, CEO and founder at Leadership Through Data. I inspire and motivate information leaders across the world. And today I'm here with Hannah Hutt. Now, Hannah helps people and teams do better work. She loves learning new things and uses both research and real-world experience to solve business problems, looking at change management. And your goal is simple. So you want to boost knowledge, speed up growth, and help people succeed. So I want to welcome you to the show today, Hannah.
Thank you, Jackie. Happy to be here.
Beautiful. So let's start a little bit about change. Now, some people like change, some people don't like change, and some people resist change. So tell me what your thoughts are in around a space around change.
Yeah, the speed of technology advancements that's happening around us, within our environment, all around us right now, is really enhancing this sort of concept of fear of missing out. It's kind of like putting it on steroid. So it's got an impact, right, on our people, our teams, our customers, our stakeholders. But before we kind of delve into that, let's talk a little bit about what change fatigue is. So change fatigue is, some of you may think, wow, burnout, stressed out, people just tuning out. But change fatigue is really about this kind of persistent, pervasive exhaustion and distrust, right? This exhaustion is one thing, but also this kind of feeling of detachment and distrust that's kind of sets into your psyche, your physiology, your physical, your mental, especially when you're subjected to constant change within, let's just say you work in a large organization and you're subjected to these large scale change. Not only are you subjected to them, but you've experienced that they haven't really succeeded, at least about 30% of the time. So think about a lab experiment. You're in the training wheel, you're constantly running, and then people are kind of like just poking you a little bit to see, how you're going to react and, how they can help you. But the reality is you're constantly in motion. And so you kind of get into this exhaustive mode, and it actually leads into burnout as well. And it leads into distrust. And so this kind of repeated failures creates sort of like this vicious cycle of employees kind of foot dragging, resenting, and becoming frustrated with their leadership as well. So that's what change fatigue really is.
Okay, brilliant. And do you see a lot of change fatigue coming through with technologies and AI popping up everywhere? And kind of what signs should we look for in ourselves and at work to ensure
Yeah.
the support?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, you can't, especially nowadays, you can't kind of like scroll on your social media without at least one post about about AI, new models coming out. But as a leader, you kind of have to step back and think, okay, around 2016-ish, right? So I've got some great research from Harvard Business Review. Around 2016, the average employee faced about 2 planned enterprise changes per year. 74% of them are willing to support the change. So the fatigue is pretty minimal. And then you get into the pandemic, right? So around 2020, 21, 22, 23, all of us have experienced this rapid shift in remote working and changing up the way that we work, the way that we communicate with our customers. And what happened during that time, actually, interestingly enough, employees are giving in 8.5 hours per week, like extra. So they're giving up additional full day of work to keep the business afloat, to keep everything running, risking burning out. But they went into it, right? They jumped into it. And then by 2022, so imagine 2020, your employees are working a full day overtime to keep things going. Fast forward to 2022, which is 2 years later. Now, the average employees face 10 planned changes. So that's 5 times above 2016 level. So their willingness to change or to support change actually fell 43%. And so this 43% gap between 43 and 74% back in 2016 created this transformation deficit, is what Gartner calls it. And so employees during this time, 55% of them are sacrificing their health and relationships for the business operations running smoothly, keeping things going. 36% lost trust in their organizations because they're constantly, remember that rat in the training wheel? They're constantly going, and they're thinking, okay, at some point, I know leadership is going to intervene, but it doesn't happen. And then 50% during that time struggled to find the needed information to do their job and to continue at that pace, right? Because when you think about performance, you think about this up and down, this sort of like peak, low, but if you constantly keep up like that, you can't have all of the information necessary that you need to keep at that level.
What do you suggest? Because obviously you can feel change fatigue with everything new coming in, with organisational change and restructures and new people coming in and people going out. That's all change in itself, isn't it? What would you recommend to an employer, signs to look out for, and one for an employee, things that they could do?
Yeah. So from the employer's perspective is that, you got to recognize that, your top-down approach that causes people to go through this massive change during the pandemic needs to change in itself. We know that depending on the context and the culture of the environment of the organization, top-down may work, but leadership actually realize that the top-down approach doesn't work and they need to prioritize change. So you can't avoid change, but they need to prioritize change. They recognize that from a leadership perspective, you have to recognize to prioritize the change. So, for example, publish your backlog priorities or sync your release calendars with other functions and departments in the organizations. Implement this culture of transparency where your workforce understand the priorities, but also being able to reconcile and see what other departments are doing at the same time so that you can also prioritize, not only as a department, but for yourself as an individual employee as well. And from the employee perspective, it's recognizing that fatigue is natural, it's real. You got to recognize it just as in any other stress factor or pain or got to recognize that is happening as well, and seek support and resources from your leadership. And the thing is, leaders are really smart people, right? Especially founders in the SaaS environment. They love excessive growth. But they also are smart enough to recognize that their people, go through certain cycles of performance, and they can't be subjected to change constantly without resources, support, and prioritized focus moments and rest. So that's what I think from both the leaders and the employees need to recognize in terms of experiencing change fatigue.
And when you talk about SaaS, it's software as a service, just for listeners that don't actually know the acronym.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Did you want to elaborate on that anymore?
Yeah. So from the leadership perspective, to further support your workforce to manage change fatigue is, like I said, proactively integrate rest periods to make it available. First of all, don't just say, okay, we recognize that we've gone through an excessive period of growth. We recognize that we've put our workforce through a major change, following with a bunch more change when it comes to AI adoption and tech transformation. But as leaders, you actually have to programmatize rest, making it available, making it accessible, and making it appropriate, right? Appropriate meaning, is it tailored to your workforce individual needs? Is it accessible in a way that they want to access it? And also making them being open source to change, making them being a part of the decisions as to implement, prioritize, and execute on the next phase or the next initiative. And another thing is your managers are doing a lot of work during this time as well. They can't always be champions, right? So you have to also prepare them, give them the resources to be resilience builders, to cultivate resilience, right? So those are the three key things I just wanted to include as well from a leadership perspective.
Amazing. So when you talk about rest, I just want to probe that in a bit more. Like, what does that look like? Rest period from change.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that rest means different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
Rest may be, for one person, it may be blocking out time in their calendars to just to reflect on their day, just to meditate, just to practice gratitude, just to practice mindfulness, to, grab a glass of water or two, or take a walk. But rest is also having focused time to think about strategy. So you kind of have to tailor to the preference of what your employees want. For myself, for example, I'm this sponge of a learner. So, as you can tell from my resume, there's all these credentials because I'm constantly learning new things. So my rest actually means being able to have the time to create, to brainstorm or to
Mm-hmm.
strategize or to read something new. Most of the time is for work, interestingly enough. And so what I mean by rest time is that just understanding what that means to different people and giving them that real time to do what they like with that. I know a lot of organizations have implemented the 15 minutes in between each hour block so that
Mm-hmm.
it's automatically blocked off and that you cannot book that time of their day. But even if you book 45 minutes, you have to also be mindful to give them that last 5 minutes to transition between having a conversation with you into having a conversation with somebody else. So that's
Brilliant,
what
brilliant.
rest means to me.
So we're actually talking about, so we're not talking about arrest from change, we're talking about arrest from the human element, because I always work on the principle that change management is a people-based process. So you
Yeah,
have to look after the people. So kind of what you're describing is that you're looking after the person's rest and kind of mental health and recovery from growth periods, not stopping the organisational change itself to give it rest
yes.
from that change. It's about the person process.
Hmm.
So I just want to kind of talk about training really, because when it comes to change management, a lot of people I feel undervalue kind of the process. So they bring on new technologies, they bring kind of AI, but change is kind of the last kind of thing on top of it from a change management perspective. Are there like any good training courses around change management that can help the people-based process, as I would say? And what would you recommend for listeners to go and do?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I mean, because we're experiencing this rapid pace of change, it's fairly new for all of us too. And so even if you're the most seasoned change manager, you kind of have to take a step back and understand that the traditional way of approaching change and training isn't going to work. It's really about understanding the culture, the context, and the fabric of the organization, the people that make up the organization as well. There's a lot of good articles on not only Harvard Business Review, but medium.com. And you mentioned, and this is really important, the people side of change. You got to take care of the people because the people is the are the tools to implement change, to sustain change, and to welcome new change in the future as well. And so if you're looking for people-centric stories, especially relating to change, AI, technology, medium.com is a good one to go. I really highly recommend that. And also for leaders, and I want to go back to the leaders because, you have the authority to make a lot of good decisions in your organization. So I want to go back to them and say, be thoughtful about implementing new ideas because I fall prey to this as well. When I learn something new, read something new, talking to somebody new, or I went to a conference, all these wonderful ideas are there. I'm like, hey, this would be so great. Let's do this. And I'm sort of working with a wonderful manager right now who is giving me a different perspective to the way that I used to function in the execution, always getting things going, doing things mode. And she's like, well, why don't we dial it down a little bit and see, let's work out this idea. Let's talk through this idea. Let's see how much of an alignment it is to our business priorities and also our culture, right? Sometimes change, and I'm not just saying this, studies have shown that change could take between 3 to 15 years. 3 years if you're being slow in a software business, 15 years is kind of the normal if you're in higher education. If I also teach in higher education, and it was a major shift, right? Being in corporate and teaching in higher ed, because in corporate, you're used to fast paced, high performing, things going all the time. But in higher education, you have to step 100 times back and take a look at the entire ecosystem and see where you can actually effect change. You can't change the entire system right away. And even in the small arena, it takes about 5 to 10 years. So for leaders, don't be too, just be a little bit more thoughtful about all of the new ideas that you learn or that you hear from your peers or you get from conferences and you're inspired by it. Think about the entire workforce that needs to kind of go along with you as
Go on
well.
more with you. And I suppose that's the vision, isn't it? Where it comes to change management, you always need a vision of what that looks like.
Yeah.
Hannah, thank you so much for your time today. How can listeners reach out to you if they want to know any more?
Yeah, so I'm available on LinkedIn and my profile is there. If you need to reach out to me, just send me a message. Yeah.
Beautiful, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely great, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Journals of the Information Entrepreneur with me, Jacqueline Stockwell. I hope you found this episode inspiring and helpful and have some takeaway tips that can be useful to you. If you liked this episode, please like, review and share it with your friends. Your support helps us reach more information leaders to stay inspired and listen to great content. Want to test out your strengths and weaknesses and measure it against our Empower framework? Please complete the scorecard. It's a great way to improve and evaluate your skills. You can find the scorecard at the end of the description of this podcast. Stay tuned for a new podcast every Thursday, and remember to be bold, be brave and be beautiful.